The silence I've been carrying for decades weighs more than any medal I've ever worn on my chest. My name is Nikolai Volkov, and I was a major in the Soviet Army. Today, at the age of 83, I feel I can no longer keep this secret. The truth about the Dyatlov Pass incident must come out, no matter what the cost. February 1959. The biting cold of the Ural region seemed to penetrate to the bone, but nothing compared to the chill I felt down my spine when I was ordered to lead a rescue mission on the Kholat-Syakhl mountain. 9 young climbers had disappeared, and our job was to find them. Little did I know that that mission would change my life forever. I remember it like it was yesterday. The helicopter flew over the vast white expanse, the noise of the propellers drowning out the sepulchral silence of the mountain. My eyes scanned the desolate landscape, looking for any sign of the missing. That's when we spotted it. The tent, torn from the inside out. We landed next to it, and the scene that awaited us defied any logical explanation. The footprints around the tent told a terrifying story. The climbers had fled barefoot, in their underwear, into the freezing night. Something had frightened them to the point where they would rather face sub-zero temperatures than remain sheltered. "Major Volkov, come and see this," shouted one of my men. He pointed to an area a little away from the tent. There, we found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko were lying under a Siberian pine tree, shoeless, wearing only their underwear. Their fingers were lacerated, as if they had tried desperately to climb the tree. The look on their faces, I'll never forget it. It was pure terror. We continued the search. With each step, the mystery deepened. We found Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin between the tree and the camp. Their positions suggested that they were trying to get back to the tent when they succumbed to the cold. But it was what we discovered at the bottom of a ravine that changed everything. The bodies of Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignoles, and Semyon Zolotaryov were in a state that defied comprehension. Dubinina had her tongue torn out, Thibaut Brignole had his skull crushed, and Zolotaryov, his eyes had disappeared. The autopsies revealed fractures and internal injuries which, according to the doctors, could only have been caused by a tremendous force comparable to that of a car crash. But there were no signs of a struggle, no external evidence of these injuries. It was at that moment that I realized we were dealing with something beyond our comprehension. At night, gathered with my team around a makeshift fire, we tried to make sense of what we had witnessed. The wind howled through the trees as if the mountain itself was lamenting the tragedy. "Maybe it was an avalanche," suggested one of the soldiers, his voice shaking slightly. I shook my head. An avalanche doesn't explain the internal injuries, nor why they fled half-naked. "Wolves," ventured another. "No animal tracks. And what wolf could cause that kind of damage without leaving a trace?" The silence that followed was heavier than the snow that surrounded us. Each of us knew deep down that we were facing something inexplicable. It was then that I noticed it. A strange glow on the horizon, above the treetops. A pulsating orange light that seemed to dance in the night sky. I blinked several times, certain that my eyes were deceiving me. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing. My men turned around, dumbfounded. The light was growing, rapidly approaching. The air around us seemed to vibrate, charged with static electricity. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. In a matter of seconds, the phenomenon was upon us. It wasn't a light, I realized with growing horror. It was something solid, an impossible metallic structure that defied the laws of physics that I knew. A deafening hum filled the air, making my teeth vibrate. I saw my men fall to their knees, covering their ears with their hands, their mouths open in silent screams. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone, leaving only the silence of the mountain and the echo of a terror I had never experienced. That night, while my men slept a restless sleep, I stood guard. My mind raced, trying to process what we had witnessed. That's when I heard the sound, a whisper, almost inaudible, coming from the darkness beyond our camp. My hand trembling, I switched on my flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing, just the white expanse of snow. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that we were not alone on that mountain. The next morning, I received direct orders from Moscow. The case was to be closed. The official cause of death: an irresistible natural force. I tried to protest, to tell them about the light, the object in the sky, but I was silenced with a veiled threat. "Major Volkov," said the cold voice on the other end of the line, "for the sake of your career and your family, you'd better forget what you saw here." And so I did. Or at least, I tried to. For decades, I carried this secret, this terrible truth about what really happened at the Dyatlov Pass. But now, in the twilight of my life, I feel it's time for the truth to come out. Because what I saw on that mountain, what happened to those 9 young people, was not the work of an avalanche, or a wild animal, or any irresistible natural force. It was something else, something that shouldn't exist in our world. And I'm afraid that one day it might come back. The memories of that fateful mission to the Dyatlov Pass continue to haunt me decades later. Every detail remains vivid in my mind, as if it had happened yesterday. After the initial discovery of the bodies and the inexplicable luminous phenomenon we witnessed, our investigation took an even more sinister turn. The morning after I saw the strange light, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. The air seemed denser, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. My men, normally robust and brave Soviet soldiers, were moving cautiously, exchanging nervous glances. "Major Volkov," Sergeant Ivanov called out to me, his voice trembling slightly, "we found something strange." I followed him to a nearby clearing. There, in the pristine snow, there was a perfect circular pattern, as if something huge had landed during the night. The snow inside the circle had completely melted, revealing the bare earth below, an impossibility considering the freezing temperatures in the region. "This wasn't here yesterday," I muttered, more to myself than to Ivanov. As we examined the area, I noticed something glinting on the edge of the circle. I crouched down to pick it up. It was a small metal fragment, no bigger than a coin. Its surface was smooth and reflected light in a way I had never seen before. It wasn't aluminum, steel, or any other metal I knew. I put the fragment in my pocket, deciding not to mention it to the others just yet. A voice in my head told me that this small piece of unknown metal could be the key to the whole mystery. We continued our search of the area. It was then that we made another disturbing discovery. About half a kilometer from where we found the first bodies, we came across a cave. Its entrance was almost imperceptible, hidden by rocks and snow. "Should we investigate, sir?" asked one of the soldiers, his reluctance evident in his voice. I nodded, swallowing. "I'll lead the way. Ivanov and Petrov, you'll accompany me. The rest of you, stand guard outside." The entrance to the cave was narrow, forcing us to enter sideways. The air inside was surprisingly warm and had a metallic smell that made my stomach turn. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing rocky walls covered in a strange phosphorescent moss. We advanced slowly, the sound of our breathing echoing off the damp walls. It was then that we heard it, a low, almost imperceptible hum coming from the depths of the cave. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Ivanov and Petrov nodded, their faces pale in the light of the lanterns. We continued moving forward, the hum getting louder with every step. The cave widened, opening up into a large chamber. And there, in the center, we saw something that defied all logic and reason. It was a structure. No, a machine. Something in between. Its surface was smooth and dark, reflecting our light in a strange way, as if it were absorbing it. It was oval in shape, about 3 meters high, and hovered a few centimeters off the floor of the cave. "My God," muttered Petrov, his voice barely audible. I approached cautiously. The hum emanated from the structure, making the air vibrate around it. I reached out, feeling an invisible force repelling my fingers when I got too close. It was then that I noticed the marks on the cave floor, footprints. But they weren't human. They were strange trails, as if something with many legs had dragged itself out of the machine. My heart raced. "We need to get out of here, now," I ordered. We had barely turned to leave when a sharp sound cut through the air. The machine began to pulsate with a bluish light, the hum increasing in intensity until it became almost unbearable. We ran. Panic gripped us as we squeezed through the narrow exit passage. Behind us, the sound grew, the light from the cave becoming more and more intense. We emerged into the daylight panting, our faces white with terror. The other soldiers looked at us in bewilderment. "Evacuate! Everyone to the helicopter, now!" I shouted. As we ran towards the landing site, I heard a crash coming from the mountain. I looked back in time to see a column of blue light rising into the sky from the direction of the cave. In the helicopter, as we moved away from the Dyatlov Pass, the silence was deafening. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts, trying to process what we had witnessed. It was then that I remembered the metal fragment in my pocket. Discreetly, I put my hand in my pocket to feel it. My blood ran cold. The fragment was hot, pulsating as if it had a life of its own. At that moment, as we flew over the icy Ural Mountains, I realized that what we had discovered at the Dyatlov Pass was just the tip of a much deeper and more terrifying iceberg. The deaths of the 9 climbers, the light in the sky, the machine in the cave. Everything was connected in a way that I still didn't fully understand. But I knew one thing for sure. The world as we knew it was about to change forever. And I, Nikolai Volkov, was at the center of that maelstrom. A maelstrom that, I feared, could engulf not just me, but all of humanity. The return to Sverdlovsk was shrouded in a heavy, tense silence. As the helicopter cut through the icy air, I couldn't get the images of what we had witnessed at the Dyatlov Pass out of my mind. The metal fragment in my pocket seemed to burn, a constant reminder that the world I knew had changed forever. As soon as we landed, we were immediately escorted to an unmarked building on the outskirts of the city. The place exuded an air of secrecy that only intensified my apprehension. Inside, we were separated. I was taken to an austere room where 3 men were waiting for me. Their cold, calculating stares told me that this was not going to be a simple debriefing session. "Major Volkov," began the man in the middle, his voice cutting like the Siberian wind. "Full report. Now?" I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the fragment in my pocket seeming to increase. I decided to omit this information, at least for the time being. I recounted the events, the discovery of the bodies, the strange injuries, the light in the sky, and finally, the cave with the alien machine. The men listened in silence, their faces impassive. When I had finished, the man on the left spoke up. "Understand, Major, what you saw today never happened. The Dyatlov Pass incident will be recorded as a tragic accident, nothing more." I felt my blood boil. "But sir, what we saw there, the people have a right to know." The man in the middle slammed the table. "The people have the right to live in peace. Volkov, think of the consequences if this information leaks out. Mass panic, chaos. Is that what you want?" I swallowed, realizing the magnitude of the situation. It wasn't just about me or the 9 dead climbers. It was about something much bigger. "What will happen now?" I asked, my voice lower than I had intended. "You and your team will be subjected to an intensive decontamination program," replied the man on the right, choosing his words carefully. "It's for your own safety." Over the next few days, I underwent a series of exhaustive medical examinations, X-rays, blood tests, psychological assessments. Every day, I felt they were looking for something, although I didn't know exactly what. It was during one of these nights of confinement that the nightmare began. I was back in the cave, but this time I was alone. The hum of the alien machine grew, becoming deafening. Suddenly the structure opened and a figure emerged from within. It was neither human nor animal. It was something other. Its multiple limbs moved fluidly, its eyes, if they were eyes, fixed on me. I woke up screaming, covered in a cold sweat. The nightmares continued, each night more vivid than the last. During the day, I noticed subtle changes in my body. My eyesight seemed sharper. I could hear conversations at impossible distances. And the metal fragment, it pulsed in sync with my heart. 2 weeks after our return, I was called back to the interrogation room. The same 3 men were waiting for me, but there was a new tension in the air. "Major Volkov," began the man in the middle, "it has come to our attention that you may be withholding information." I felt my heart race. How did they know? "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The man on the left slid a folder across the table. Inside were high-resolution photos of the place where we found the alien machine, and there, clearly visible, was the mark left where I had picked up the fragment. "A last chance, Volkov. What did you pick up in the cave?" At that moment, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. With one swift movement, I took the fragment from my pocket and placed it on the table. The effect was immediate. Alarms sounded. Men in protective suits burst into the room. I was grabbed, immobilized. Through the chaos, I saw the fragment being placed in a special container. "You have no idea what you've set in motion, Volkov," shouted one of the men as I was dragged out. The next few hours were a blur. I was taken to an even more secret location, subjected to a battery of new tests. I heard whispers about contamination, mutation, and containment protocol. It was then that I understood the true magnitude of what we had found at Dyatlov Pass. It wasn't just about an alien machine or 9 mysterious deaths. It was about something that had the potential to change the very essence of humanity. As I lay on a stretcher, surrounded by doctors and scientists, a sudden clarity hit me. The fragment wasn't just a piece of alien technology, it was a seed. And I, Nikolai Volkov, had become its host. The implications were terrifying. What was happening to my body? What was the government planning to do to me? And, most importantly, what did that alien entity really want? As the darkness of the sedation began to envelop me, a certainty formed in my mind. The truth about the Dyatlov Pass had to come out, no matter what the cost, and I would somehow have to escape to tell that story. The world had to know. Before it was too late, time was losing meaning in the bowels of that secret facility. Days, perhaps weeks, passed as I was subjected to an endless series of tests and experiments. My once familiar body became increasingly strange to me. The changes were subtle at first: greater visual acuity, sharper hearing, faster reflexes. But soon, it became clear that something much deeper was happening. One night, I woke up covered in sweat, my body burning as if it were on fire. I looked down at my hands and, with horror, saw that my skin looked translucent, veins pulsing with a bluish light, the same color as the alien machine in the cave. The doctors and scientists who watched me day and night were fascinated and terrified in equal measure. I heard whispers about accelerated evolution and alien-human symbiosis. I was no longer a patient or even a test subject. I had become a specimen. It was during one of these moments of fevered clarity that I realized I needed to escape, not just for myself, but for the sake of humanity. Whatever was happening to me, it couldn't be left in the hands of those who wanted to bury the truth. The opportunity came unexpectedly. During a transfer between examination rooms, I felt a sudden wave of energy run through my body. For a brief moment, I could see through the walls, as if they were made of glass. Not only that, but I could feel the electricity running through the circuits, the security systems, the cameras. I acted on instinct. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I broke free of the guards. My movements were a blur, faster than the human eye could follow. Alarms sounded, but I was already on the move, navigating the labyrinthine corridors as if I had a mental map of the facility. Armed guards tried to stop me. Their movements seemed slow, predictable. I avoided them with a supernatural grace, my body moving in ways that defied physics. Finally, I reached the outside. The cold Siberian night air hit my lungs, and for the first time in weeks I felt alive. But there was no time to savor the freedom. I could hear helicopters approaching, sniffer dogs being let loose. I ran, through dense forest, over rough terrain. My feet barely seemed to touch the ground. With each step, I felt my body adapt, transform. Branches that should have cut my skin simply slid around it. Rocks that should have hurt me were avoided with inhuman precision. I don't know how long I ran for. Hours, perhaps. The sun was beginning to rise over the horizon when I finally stopped, exhausted, on the banks of a frozen river. It was then that I saw my reflection in the icy surface. The face that stared back at me was no longer entirely human. My eyes shone with that same bluish light. My skin had a subtle metallic sheen. Veins and arteries formed complex patterns under my skin, pulsing with alien energy. I fell to my knees, the implications of what I had become finally hitting me. I was no longer Nikolai Volkov, the loyal Soviet major. I had become something more, something between two worlds. A distant sound alerted me. Helicopters. They were getting closer. I knew I couldn't be captured again. The knowledge I carried, not just in my mind, but in every cell of my transformed body, was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. It was at that moment that I realized my mission had changed. It was no longer just about revealing the truth of the Dyatlov Pass. It was about understanding what I had become and what that meant for the future of humanity. I looked at the horizon, feeling a strange connection with something far away, something beyond the stars. The alien presence in me wasn't just an infection or a mutation. It was a bridge between two worlds, two forms of existence. With one last look at my alien reflection, I plunged into the icy river. The cold water should have been a shock, but my new body absorbed it as if it were part of it. I swam against the current, feeling every molecule of water around me, every current and eddy. As I pulled away from the shore, a thought crystallized in my mind. The real journey was just beginning. The Dyatlov Pass incident was not the end of a story, but the first chapter of something much bigger. And I, in this new form, would be the narrator of that cosmic story. As I walked away, leaving behind the sound of helicopters and dogs, I felt a strange peace. The fear and confusion of the last few days gave way to a steely determination. I would find answers. I would discover the truth about the beings who had created the machine in the cave. And perhaps most importantly, I would learn to control and understand the changes in my body. Because something told me that these newfound abilities would be crucial in the days to come. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange as I emerged from the river kilometers ahead. Before me, the vastness of the Siberian taiga stretched to the horizon. A new day was beginning, and with it, a new era for Nikolai Volkov, and perhaps for all of humanity. The days following my escape merged into a blur of discoveries and adaptations. The vastness of the Siberian taiga became my refuge and my laboratory, as I explored the limits of what my transformed body could do. I discovered that I could survive in extreme conditions effortlessly. The biting cold that would have killed an ordinary man in a matter of hours barely bothered me. My need for food and water decreased dramatically, as if my body was feeding off some other source of energy. But the physical changes were just the tip of the iceberg. My mind was expanding in ways I could barely comprehend. Sometimes I caught glimpses of distant places, visions of worlds beyond the stars. It was these moments that left me most terrified and amazed. It was during one of these visions that I realized I was not alone. The alien consciousness that had merged with me through the metal fragment was there, always present in the back of my mind. It wasn't hostile, as I had initially feared. It was curious, eager to learn, to understand. Over time, I learned to communicate with it, not with words, but with sensations, images, and abstract concepts. Slowly, I began to understand the purpose of the alien presence on Earth. They, and I realized that they was a vast and ancient civilization, were explorers, not conquerors, as I had initially feared. They had scattered their seeds, the fragments like the one I found, on countless worlds over millennia. Their goal? Evolution, understanding, symbiosis. The incident at Dyatlov Pass was unplanned. It was an accident, an unintentional collision between two worlds that were not ready to meet. The 9 climbers, their deaths were tragic, a cosmic misunderstanding. As I absorbed these revelations, I felt a crushing responsibility weigh heavily on my shoulders. I was the bridge between two worlds, the only being on Earth capable of truly understanding the intentions of this alien intelligence. but I also knew that I couldn't simply return to civilization and reveal everything. The panic that would ensue, the fear of the unknown, could lead to catastrophic consequences. It was then that I made a decision. I needed to find others like me. Surely, somewhere in the vast Soviet territory, there would be others who had come into contact with the alien fragments. Others who might be going through similar transformations. My journey took me across Siberia, avoiding cities and military installations. I used my new abilities to move unnoticed, sometimes traveling for days without stopping. It was in a remote village in the Ural Mountains that I found the first clue. Rumors of a man with strange abilities, able to predict the future and cure diseases with a touch. When I met him, I saw the same bluish glow in his eyes that I saw in mine. Yuri, as he called himself, had found a fragment years before, during a geological expedition. His transformation was slower, more subtle than mine. Together, we began to piece together the parts of the cosmic puzzle, but we weren't alone in our quest. The Soviet government, I discovered, had been aware of the alien presence for decades. Secret projects, experiments on humans, attempts to replicate alien technology, all this was going on in the shadows, and they were hunting us. One night, while Yuri and I were discussing our next steps, I felt a familiar presence. The alien consciousness in me stirred, alerting me to imminent danger. Seconds later, the sound of helicopters cut through the night air. Searchlights swept through the forest around us. "They found us," said Yuri, his face pale in the firelight. I nodded, feeling a strange calm envelop me. "Yes, but they have no idea what they're up against." As we prepared for the imminent confrontation, I realized that we were on the threshold of something monumental. The fate of humanity, the future of two species, was at stake. And I, Nikolai Volkov, once a simple Soviet major, now found myself at the center of this cosmic maelstrom. The lights were getting closer. The sound of boots crushing branches echoed through the forest. I exchanged a glance with Yuri, seeing in him the same determination I felt. It was time to reveal to the world the truth about the Dyatlov Pass, about the alien presence, about everything. But more than that, it was time to show humanity that the future that awaited us in the stars was far more vast and wonderful than anyone could have imagined. With one last thought for the 9 climbers whose deaths had started it all, I prepared myself to face whatever came next. The final confrontation was about to begin. The Siberian night air vibrated with the tension of the impending moment. Yuri and I positioned ourselves, our minds in perfect harmony thanks to the alien consciousness we shared. The lights of the helicopters danced between the trees, getting closer and closer. "Nikolai," whispered Yuri, "what if we can't convince them?" I looked at my companion, seeing the fear and determination in his shining eyes. "Then we'll show them," I replied, feeling the alien power pulsing through my veins. The first soldier emerged from the darkness, weapon in hand. I recognized the uniform. Spetsnaz, Special Forces. They weren't here to negotiate. In the blink of an eye, Yuri and I moved. With superhuman speed and agility, we disarmed the first attackers before they could even react. But there were too many of them, and they were well trained. Chaos broke out in the forest. Shots rang out. Orders were shouted. Yuri and I moved like shadows, using our enhanced skills to avoid the bullets and neutralize the soldiers without killing them. It was then that I heard a familiar voice. "Stop immediately, Volkov." It was the man from the interrogation room, the one who had ordered my confinement. He emerged from the shadows, accompanied by a team of scientists and more soldiers. "You don't understand what's at stake here," I shouted, my voice carrying an inhuman timbre that made everyone stop. The leader gestured, and the soldiers lowered their weapons. "Then explain it to us, Volkov. What exactly is going on here?" At that moment, I felt the alien presence in my mind intensify. Images, concepts, and emotions flowed through me. I understood that this was the moment that the whole Dyatlov Pass incident had prepared us for. "What you call aliens," I began, my voice echoing in the clearing, "are not invaders or conquerors. They are explorers, seeking understanding and evolution through symbiosis with other life forms. I held out my hand, and a bluish light emanated from it. Holograms formed in the air around us, showing distant galaxies, alien worlds, and this civilization's epic journey through the cosmos. The Dyatlov Pass incident was an accident, an early encounter between our species. But now, we're ready for the next step. The scientists watched in amazement, their clipboards forgotten as they absorbed the impossible images before them. Humanity is on the verge of an evolutionary leap, I continued. Not through conquest or subjugation, but through partnership and mutual understanding. Yuri stepped forward, his skin now glowing with the same bluish hue as mine. I imagine a world where diseases are a thing of the past, where we can explore the stars, where the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations is at our fingertips. The leader stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the holographic images. And how do we know we can trust these entities? That's when I felt it, a vast ancient presence, manifesting itself through Yuri and me. Our voices merged, speaking not just with words, but with concepts and emotions that transcended human language. We are the guardians, we said in unison. We have been traveling the cosmos for eons, seeking partners, not subjects. Earth is just one of the many worlds we touch, but it has unique potential. The images around us have changed, showing a possible future. Futuristic cities in harmony with nature, humans exploring distant galaxies, technologies beyond imagination. The Dyatlov Pass incident was the first contact, unintentional but necessary. Now, we offer a choice. The leader and his men were paralyzed, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. You can try to contain us, study us, fear us, or you can join us, evolve with us, and open the door to a future beyond your wildest dreams. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the minds around us processing, struggling to comprehend the enormity of what was being offered. Finally, the leader spoke, his voice trembling. "What if we refuse?" Yuri and I exchanged a look. "Then we'll leave," we replied. "We'll leave Earth to find another world ready to take the next step. But the potential we see in you would be a tragic loss for the cosmos." The next few hours were intense. Debates, questions, demonstrations of our abilities. Gradually, I saw the fear in the eyes of the soldiers and scientists replaced by curiosity and, finally, hope. When the sun rose, illuminating the forest clearing, a decision had been made, not just by the group present there, but by world leaders who had been contacted during the night. Humanity was ready for its next evolutionary step. In the years that followed, the world changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Technology has advanced by leaps and bounds. Previously incurable diseases have been eradicated. Space exploration has ceased to be a distant dream and has become a reality. And what about me, Nikolai Volkov? I became an ambassador between two worlds, a bridge between the human and the cosmic. The Dyatlov Pass incident, which once seemed like a senseless tragedy, turned out to be the catalyst for humanity's greatest leap. As I watched the first human colony on Mars being established, I can't help but think of the 9 climbers whose lives were lost on that fateful night in 1959. Their names are now remembered not as victims, but as the first unwitting explorers of a new era. The universe, vast and mysterious, awaits, and we humans and guardians will take the next step together.